blizzards are the most fierce and destructive of all winter storms. They are as foreign as ice hockey to whole regions of this planet where they do not ever actually even experience this season. So when they happen, it's a safe bet as to where. Hi, I'm Chris May, writer, producer, and host of This Day in Weather History from the Weather Network in Canada. So when the North American blizzard of 2008 struck most of southern and eastern North America from March 6th through the 10th, it was dangerous, it was crippling, and it was massive. And it was this day in weather history. Right, so this is another story that I will pick up in progress because of the impact it made on this particular day in the 5 days that this blizzard lived. The first thing that jumps out and hits you right in the face is that it was a legit major winter storm, and that it stretched from Arkansas through Quebec. Along its path, it wreaked havoc on the east coast of the United States with heavy rain, damaging winds, and tornadoes, causing locally significant damage. But the worst affected regions by the winter-style weather stretched from the Ohio Valley to southern Quebec, where up to a half a meter of snow fell locally, including the major cities of Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, and Ottawa, Ontario. And before you think this was probably taken all in stride by these winter-ready hardy, think again. For most who were gripped by this, it was the worst winter storm anyone had experienced in the past several years. The intensity and longevity of this monster resulted in at least 17 deaths across 4 U.S. states and 3 Canadian provinces, while hundreds of others were injured. But not by the snow, rather along the southernmost tail of the front in weather-related accidents and tornadoes. Remember that this day in weather history can be enjoyed a number of ways. Right now, for instance, you are listening to the full version of today's story on your favorite podcast provider. But there is also the daily podcast video short. They're shot right here in my podcast recording studio, so you get that perspective, and oftentimes they will include visuals from that day's event from when it happened in weather history. So after listening to the full story, go out and check the podcast video short either on television or online at theweathernetwork.com/weather history. Okay, so what happened? March 6th. A low-pressure system developed across Texas. It brought rain to the Lone Star State, but as it slid east, the wind that wrapped around the low and collided with the Arctic air being dragged in from the north converted to snow in Oklahoma. But in that mighty clash along the frontal passage, there were tornadoes. A lot of tornadoes. The first of 17 twisters touched down near Corpus Christi, Texas. March 7th. The winter head of this storm headed to Ohio and produced heavy snowfall accumulations. Again, in the south, depending on where you were, determined what season you saw. Tennessee and Arkansas received winter snow, while Florida and Georgia were hit with several summer-like tornadoes. March 8th and 9th. Believe it or not, here is where the storm actually really picked up. Cincinnati picked up 22 centimeters of snow, while Louisville, Kentucky reported 28. Oh, and then there was Canada. Regions in southeastern Ontario and southern Quebec received almost double what I just quoted you just now. As an example, Ottawa was buried in under 48 centimeters of snow and was the hardest hit of all involved. Now, Ottawa knows snow, but they also know when too much is too much, and this was too much. It was so far beyond sustainability that roofs on homes began to collapse. Thousands of people were without power, and of course, and I cannot explain why, but Quebec suffered the hardest in yet another historic power failure. In this storm, there were 87,000 in Quebec who were freezing in the dark. With no power, you can't open buildings, and many school boards and universities across the states in Canada had to shut down. Tearing a page from the book according to COVID 2020, this snowstorm occurred at the end of March break in Quebec and the start of it in Ontario. So they just kept everyone home until it was corrected. On top of this, flights were delayed or canceled in many airports, but it has been said that the proactive efficiency of officials was how the death toll from this was as low as it was for how devastating and far-reaching it was. Overall, the storm caused 17 deaths, cost $789 million, and a lot of this happened this day in weather history. Tomorrow is March 8th, and we're cranking on that TDI-WH time machine dial to take us back to the year 1669. On the television station, the Weather Network in Canada, I will regularly report on stories involving the most active volcano in all of Europe, Mount Etna of Italy's Sicilian east coast. But every legend has a beginning, and Etna saw its on March 8th of 1669. That story explodes into a podcast episode tomorrow, right here on This Day in Weather History, with me, your host, Chris May.